If we can have that kind of understanding that the experiences that we're having in the sporting world somehow prepare us for a life situation that we're going to have over here, that's what we're about. We're not about the winning, and we have to change the culture, or at least go against the current culture of the day.
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast, helping families thrive.
Welcome back to Focus on the Family.
Thank you.
You have stirred the pot. The hornet's nest is shaking. Again, because this is so core to who we are. We do invest highly in our sporting activities, our children's sporting activities. I can remember, and I want you guys to speak to this, and I have shared this story a couple of times, but I remember being in 6th grade. I was in Little League. They stacked 3 games a night, boom, 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 and I was the next game. And I was watching a poor little boy. I felt bad for him. It was one of those pressure moments where it's the bottom of the last inning, and that team was down by a couple of runs. The bases were loaded, and the count was 3-2. And this little kid's up at the plate, and he wet his pants for all to see. And you could just see, it spread right through his little gray flannel Little League pants. And I just was mortified for him. I didn't laugh. I didn't make fun of him at all because I felt that could be me. But talk about that kind of pressure that little lad was feeling.
Well, unfortunately, as you mentioned in your intro, that there is so much good about what we can learn from sports and how it can help to develop kids. But the more that we as adults have gotten into it and come through it, we've changed the perspective and we've changed the priorities. And so when you look at that young lad, that's devastating.
He's probably still talking about it, at least with his wife.
One of the questions would be, how did everyone else around there handle that situation? And that would go to one of those myths to say it wouldn't have happened if all of the parents wouldn't have been there. No one would have known about it. I mean, the other kids would have or not. Someone has got to be there to put the tender love and care to that situation.
Be that child's champion.
Be that child's champion, and to recognize what would be really interesting to see if there isn't a situation where a parent, anybody, any adult sitting there went through a very similar situation, not wetting their pants at 45, but something similar to where that total embarrassment of that situation occurred. And so when you look at it, how can we turn that into a positive?
And I'll say that's the moment where I want my child who's sitting on the bench to be the person that I want them to be. We assume that youth sports is instilling our family's values. But, when it's win-win-win, when it's the macho ideal, when it's you can't cry, I want my child to be the kid who gives that one a pat on the back, when he comes in and says, it's all right, don't worry about it. Those are the values that I want to see my kids embodying as they're playing youth sports.
I like that. Hey, let me ask you this too. One of the myths you address in your book is that we owe it to our children. And especially if you played sports, you do kind of feel, okay, I owe them every opportunity, or I owe her every opportunity. You did women's basketball, so you're jumping here.
No, that idea, I owe my child everything. I'm thinking of my granddad growing up in the Depression where, his aunt would go without eating a pork chop so that he could have one. Maybe those adults owed our children something. My kids and most of the kids I know are privileged. They have so much. I don't think I owe them everything. I think I'm a better parent if I don't give them everything. So I'd love to dispel that idea that we owe them something. And what Dave and I are encouraging parents to do is to know your child. And that's what I love when you notice that, t-ball, baseball might not be your son's thing, is to recognize, maybe art is that child's thing. Maybe it's something else. And that's just good parenting when you can see who your child is, and it might not be athlete.
I don't see anything wrong with giving them an opportunity. You want to give your kids opportunities. The question is, do I owe it to them? It's a very fine line between giving them the opportunity to go after their dreams, to involve themselves, to learn from all the good that happens in sports. Nothing wrong with giving them that opportunity, but doing it because I owe it to them to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. That's where it comes, to my mind, a little bit off of the balance.
Well, that's that peer pressure that we parents face, right? I mean, okay, Jim, if you and I are talking and your son is playing football and my son, to use your illustration, Margot, is good at art, that doesn't work so well in dad groups as we're talking about accomplishments. You know, well, yeah, my kid had 3 touchdowns. My son drew a nice picture. You know what I'm saying? The culture doesn't support that.
So how
does
do
it?
you, as a parent, manage that? What do you do? Say, hey.
Well, one of the things that I would suggest, and this goes back maybe to the congregational piece, would be I really encourage congregations to form these support groups among parents who have kids at this age, both in the arts and the music, just to sit down and talk. Because the one thing, starting all the way back from the producer who had the 10-month-old, she doesn't know what to do. But if she has a question about it, she should be able to talk to other people around there. So if you can sit down, if we can sit down in groups of parents and actually honestly say, you know, I don't know what to do because my son is an artist and not a sports person.
Yeah.
How do we do that? And provide that safe environment for everybody to own who they are and who their kids are, rather than just taking on this role that we have in our society that we're going to talk about my son or daughter when they're really good around the water cooler at work, and otherwise we won't.
Margot, you touched on this a second ago, but you began to weave that family values kind of perspective in with sports. Let's drill into that a little bit, because as Christians, you know, we want our kids, our young people, to come out of these experiences with greater integrity, to be honest, to manage disappointment well. Sometimes it doesn't mix that well because the other parent sitting next to you, hey, I want to win the game. Your kid dropped the ball. You're going, back off, guy. I mean, that happens.
Like John's situation with other parents, I don't think that my responsibility is to other parents. My responsibility is to my child. And I'm thinking of my daughter's one bad high school basketball season, and I could not have been more proud. She was mostly benched, but when the starters came in, she was hustling to bring each one of them water. And that's the most successful sports season that one of my children has had, because those are the values that I want her to be embodying. And yeah, maybe they never won.
But Margot, come on. That competitive parent is hearing that going, oh, right. Yeah. Goody two shoes. I'm sorry, but I mean, really? You were happy she was on the bench?
You're exactly right.
Come on.
I understand that not every parent is going to buy into this, but there's a lot of parents who are that Dave and I are finding are waking up to say, oh, maybe it is okay that this is what my family is about.
Dave, let me ask you this, though. The intensity of sporting today, I see it. You know, when I played football, I mean, we were ragtag. We didn't have all the latest equipment, the wrist stuff, the hand stuff, the gloves. I mean, we just kind of got out there. They issued some equipment. We put it on and we played. Today, they all look like they're pro players, and everybody wants to look the part. And that intensity almost follows with the professional look, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, as I said from the very beginning, we have made this an adult event. And we put all that stuff on. And the first thing that does is it also clouds our ability to really understand how good our children are. They look the part, so therefore we think they're going to be in that 3% that start playing in college, and they really aren't. And so the trap...
3%. You just threw that out there, but you got to catch that. Only 3% of high school athletes will
play in college at any level.
And then how many of those actually go on to play the pros?
Only about 1%.
Of that 3%.
Yeah.
It's a small number.
It is a very small number, which again, doesn't mean you shouldn't play the sports, but you should have the perspective of what you're really trying to do it for. And so if we can go back to this, talking about instilling the values, I understand how difficult it is to sit there when the mom and dad are over beside you or are just screaming and yelling and want to win, and you have a different value. And I don't know if you can come up with it, Margot, but you've told a very fascinating story that didn't get into our book.
My soccer player was benched by his parents because of his grades. And it was a big game for the team. His English teacher came running over, waving a progress report that she had just printed out. He can play, he can play. And I had to say in front
This is at the game?
Yes.
At the game. In front of the parents, the coach, the players, the teacher. I don't know what he told you, but yours isn't the only class in which he's, failing, and he's not going to play. Like, the teacher was heartbroken, but I love it because after the game, she did give him a talking to. But that was a hard decision as a mom.
Oh, the pressure for you
To
had
sit
to be
him down.
enormous. Everybody's looking at you. The coach, you got the evil eye from the coach.
How
I'm
did
sure.
you withstand the pressure from your child on that?
Oh, he knew. He knew that he had sort of not described
He
the
played the
situation to
system.
his teacher as he should have.
Well, and that would also go back to the preparation, because I'm sure that Margot has had some of these conversations with them. Here's why we're doing it. Here's the values that we
knew.
can instill in what's going on, and whether you set those parameters to say, this is a privilege to play, you're going to have to keep up all of your chores, you're going to have to keep up your academics, you're going to have to do everything else. Those are conversations that I'm sure Margot has had with her soccer player, and so you prepare them for that. Oh, they're disappointed, trust me. But
And David, this again points to the culture at large, is that we don't understand the benefit of failure.
absolutely.
We only think in terms of success, but failure brings a lot of good character building to your child.
Let me tell you a quick story, which I just find fascinating, and that is, I was working with a group of young people at a convention one time, and I talked about disappointments and how to handle disappointments and failures. And so I put together scenarios, and it was a basketball game, and you were down by one, and they called traveling, and the other team got the ball, threw it in, and threw a Hail Mary or whatever, and scored, and you lost, and they went on to the state championship, and what are your feelings? And so these young people started talking about feelings, frustration, life's not fair, anger, mad at the referee, mad at this and all that. I said, okay, now can you think about something down the road in your life that might be similar? And several people had answers. And one young man in the front row raised his hand and he said, miscarriage. And I was stunned. But he and his family somewhere, I never talked to him afterwards, somewhere in his family, he had a situation that was close to somebody throwing in a half-court shot to win the state championship and make you lose. And if we can make that kind of comparison, I'm not trying to make sports to miscarriages, please understand me, but if we can have that kind of understanding that the experiences that we're having in the sporting world somehow prepare us for a life situation that we're going to have over here, that's what we're about. We're not about the winning, and we have to change the culture, or at least go against the current culture of the day.
Margot, let me ask you, when it comes to the pressure, you have a 7-8-year-old, they may not have a lot of interest, but you as the adult, you're looking down line, they have enough interest that if they start now, they'll have the skill set to play junior high school, and yet they're not really wanting to play. How do you manage that? And then talk about the other end of that continuum. Now they are in 8th grade. I've got that situation. Troy, he did not play Little League. He all of a sudden said, I want to try baseball. And he went out and he actually did really well. He hit about 300. Now listen to me. He played third base, but he only played maybe 3-4 innings a game. He didn't play the full game because there were other players that had played 3 or 4 years before, and this team kind of had held together, so he was the new kid. All that stuff. And I'm sitting there as a parent thinking, if I would have started him at 7, 8, that might have worked better. And now he wants to play in 8th grade, but he's only got 1 year under his belt. So what do you
I
say?
have some really good news for you. Studies have shown there's not a correlation between a child's athletic development ability before age 12 and after age 12. And it's really counterintuitive. And so what that means is kids who really shined as 8-year-olds are getting passed by other players who are developing a little bit later. And in my experience as a parent, I had a 2-year-old when he was 3, 4. He was magic with any ball that he touched. And he was the star in all of his sports when he was 7, 8, 9. And so I see a certain future for him. And he gets to a certain age and it shifts. He did find one sport that he's, sort of enjoying and pursuing. But parents can't hold on to that too tightly, and I hope you hear it as good news and not bad news.
I do, and that's a good thing. So don't overinvest when they're young.
Yeah, I know.
Meaning you're going to be a pro and you're going to play college.
No, I absolutely. And I think one of the interesting things about it, and I want to make sure that we understand that the study that she referred to is that there is some correlation, but not a lot of correlation. And so the message in that study is just because they are really good as a 5-year-old or as a 12-year-old doesn't automatically mean they're going to be the quarterback on the high school varsity. Doesn't mean you shouldn't stop letting them play, but that's what we put our minds into. And I've coached so many junior high kids who got passed by the other people who came on afterwards.
Right.
But our first mind is they're really good as a 3-year-old, as a 5-year-old. They're unnatural with the ball, et cetera. So the point is, just because, and no college coach has ever recruited a kid because their U10 soccer team won the national championship. Okay, it's based upon later on in life.
And you know, one of the things too, it's a great opportunity to prepare your young one for that environment. I had one that, he wanted to try out for basketball. 40 kids showed up. There were going to be 12 positions, and he had not played YMCA basketball. I mean, he did a little bit in the driveway with our hoop, but that was it. So before I dropped him off, I said, now, some of these kids have been playing a while, so just go out and give your best, and then we'll see where it goes. So I pick him up the first night. He's beaming because he got through the first cut. Like 15 of the kids were gone. And his dad, yeah, I made it. That's great. And he goes, but there's another cut tomorrow night. They're going to get down to 12. And sure enough, I picked him up that night. He wasn't beaming quite as bright. And he got into the car. So I'm thinking, what do I say? And he gets in the car, and I just said, how'd it go? And he said, I didn't make it. And I said, how you feeling about that? And he goes, actually pretty good. The fact that I haven't played a lot and I got this far, I'm doing okay with it. And I said, okay, good. And now we can work on it, and next year you can try again. But you got to find those opportunities to build them up, right?
Well, one of the keys that I would say is the question that you asked your son. How are you feeling about that? Because most times parents will say, who's that coach? What do they know about it? I've seen that other kid play. How did he make it? And they just go on and on this rant. And you were more concerned about how he was feeling about the situation. Now, the next question would be, can you find him another opportunity? That's the one problem I have with the current culture of the youth sports. It's a pyramid system where we keep selecting. Everybody starts playing at the rec level and all of that, and then we start finding the travel teams, and we got to figure out whether Colorado Springs can beat Fort Collins in 9-year-old basketball or soccer or ice hockey or
it's
something.
It's vital we find that
right.
out.
It's important. It's important to the future of the world or something in Colorado. So, we go ahead and do that. But what happens is, if you're not selected, what do you say? I'm done. I quit. And that's why they're quitting. So we have this pyramid system that's being developed, and we don't have enough programs out there that will let your son go play something else.
Well, and the other thing, at that age, rejection comes, and it feels like tons of weight, not ounces. We know as adults that pimple on your face is not going to destroy your life. But at that age, it's big. These are disappointments, setbacks that sometimes they're just not mature enough to manage in the larger context.
Yeah, I would also say that don't take it too far in that conversation and make it this philosophical tirade for about a half an hour on what you can learn from this whole experience and everything else. But you're absolutely right. I think it's a time, and at that time, I'd just also tell you, he doesn't want to hear a lot of your failure stories either at that point. But you raise a very good point into saying you have to at least identify as how painful that is. And your question about how do you feel, and then that really released him because he could recognize that you weren't disappointed. If you showed disappointment, now he's got a real problem in knowing how to handle it. So I commend you for the question that you asked.
No, it's just those things are good things to remember.
Absolutely.
You talk in the book, Overplayed, how fear and not love can drive our choices as parents. Talk about that, because fear and love, this gets down to the core of our spiritual character and our commitment to Christ.
Mm-hmm. I think we heard that in this pressure to start our kids really young. It's a fear of missing out. And we're just always wanting to invite parents to look at who your child is and be driven by love and not fear. And love means we're going to be making different choices than some other parents.
Yeah, I would say you talked about the culture being very different. I think that's where the real crux of the issue comes, is the fact that not only has the pressure come on children to be good in the sports, we as parents feel the pressure that we're not being good parents if our kid wasn't the starter. And so when you start to do that, now that's the fear. The fear is that if my son or daughter isn't successful, it's somehow a reflection of my parenting skills. whether it be that I didn't give them the opportunity, I didn't push them hard enough, I didn't do all of that. So the fear is actually personal in my mind. A lot of this is the fear of the parents having kids who weren't successful in sports, and the love comes through to say, no, you need to focus on who your son or daughter is as a whole person, and don't base it just upon the sports.
Well, and I think the difficulty we have as Christian sporting families is that we don't want to make mistakes. I mean, we're trying hard to teach our kids fundamentally spiritual values that will last them a lifetime. On top of that foundation, we're building in hopefully good academic disciplines that they can learn the things they need to learn. On top of that, we're using sports to hopefully teach them character and success and failure, all those things. But we can get so intentional about it that we get too wrapped up in it, as opposed to just letting it happen naturally.
And I want to jump in and say, as a Christian sporting family, I think any parent wants to do what's best for their child. But as a Christian, I'm also concerned with what's best for other children. And I feel like we haven't touched on this yet. There are kids on my children's teams who maybe can't afford $125 for the warm-up outfit. Or there's a kid in my neighborhood who really should be playing, but his parents are working a couple of jobs and they can't get him there. So I would love for Christian families, yes, bless your child, but be looking a little further, have some peripheral vision to see kids who, might do great if we could help them have some of these opportunities and excel. It's not about just my child, it's about other kids as well.
And that's a great idea. If you see that, maybe that's something you or maybe a couple of parents could participate in, take care of the equipment cost or the registration fee, and
do it privately with the coach.
Right.
That's a
And
great
just do it
ministry
behind.
idea.
Yeah, that's a neat thing to do.
Well, that's the other thing that we have to recognize is what we are talking about is very much of a privileged situation, because I've talked to many people in the inner cities of different places that just simply don't have the opportunities that our children have when we're out there. So I think that you're absolutely right to try to build the balance here between adding the spiritual things. I would also just make sure that we don't always see sporting events as this evangelical tool, because that's really not why we might say, well, the reason we're playing is because we want to minister to other people, and it's kind of like, are you sure your kid knows that? That's not really what your kid's about, and all of that. And I really like her idea of somehow seeing beyond ourselves in it.
Dave and Margot, one of the things I observed with college athletics particularly, we did a Super Bowl ad with Tim Tebow, and we were able to go to the last game of the season. And just at the hotel with the parents and the players, just watching them interact, a lot of the pro scouts came because it was the end of several of their season. And you saw different dynamics going on. You could see parents, maybe single parent moms who were desperate for their young men to make it because it was going to help pay for some things. Talk about that pressure, getting into college, getting the scholarship. Maybe they're coming from poor districts, and the pressure is on those young men and women to do well. Have you experienced that kind of family dynamic?
Well, certainly you're talking about Division I level, and my experience has all been at the Division III level, so we usually don't have those that are even thinking about or knowing that they're going to go pro. And I think that creates a real dilemma. What's interesting about that is the fact that one of the studies that recently came out was indicating that professional basketball players, about 40% of professional basketball players have a relative who has played their sport at the very highest level. In other words, indicating there is a gene pool there that's connecting them to where they're going to be at. And quite honestly, I don't know exactly how to address the situation when the high-level college and the pro sports are actually the ticket out of some of the poverty situations that are there. That's a dilemma that I really haven't personally faced because of where I'm at, and yet you see that as a guide. And actually, you also see that many of those were multi-sport athletes all the way through the high school, and they didn't. It's interesting. They didn't. If one thing you could say is they didn't have all of those opportunities to play all the stuff we've just been talking about, and look where they got.
Right.
So
And
if
that
we could at least
sheer
look
ability.
at it and say, this is a great opportunity to invest in my child, but it may not be this result out here. That's not why I'm doing it.
Right.
Okay, and that's the don't go, this is why I'm doing it.
I'm telling you, these last couple of days, as a parent of two boys, and John, I know you're feeling it too.
I've been tracking here, yeah.
And every parent who has children who want to be or who are already in sports, I know this has been helpful. It's been helpful to me. And we so appreciate your book, Overplayed, and just the time and investment of sharing your hearts, your experiences with us. Thank you so very much for being with us. I hope you can support the ministry, because I know it's the kind of tool or resource that you're going to need. And I wish a few years ago I would have had this. It would have helped my journey with Trent and Troy and made me, I think, a better parent in some cases. And that's the point, isn't it? And we've been through those experiences, learned from our mistakes. And I know that both David and Margot are saying that. You've got plenty of mistakes, but also some great successes. All right, it's your last chance. We're signing off. So both of you hit me with that last piece of advice for that parent of the 8th grader and the 10th grader. What do I got to do?
I want moms and dads to feel that they have the freedom to do what's best for their child. So I hope parents are going to live free without a lot of these pressures that are crushing families
Be
today.
intentional in that way.
Absolutely.
I really hope that this starts conversation, that this starts discussion, because we have avoided this for so long. It's there, it's the culture, we're sucked into it, and we need to find ways to actually honestly look at ourselves and say what's best for our kids and how can I best handle it. If I want nothing else, I want to have parents and churches, congregations, youth pastors starting to openly discuss this, because that's the only way they're going to find solutions.
That's a wonderful point. David King and Margot Starbuck, co-authors of the book Overplayed. This has been a wonderful discussion. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Hey, I'm John Fuller, and thanks for watching. Get more info about Focus over here and more from our guests over there, and be sure to subscribe to our channel as well.